All right. Well, folks, welcome to the November Geopolitical Peanut Gallery because a lot's been going on lately, and we got a few things to say about it, mainly because there are a lot of people with a lot of things to say about it that are mostly wrong. And,
Who would those be?
Mainly a lot of people, self-proclaimed conservatives, acting like a bunch of hippies in the 70s and 80s.
I mean, it's not entirely because of this reason, but a lot of it is because, like, the current Republican Party is just the Democrats from 10, 20 years ago.
No.
I mean,
Which
literally, and not even some of them are Democrats from 4 years ago.
Yeah. And they're not quiet about it. They're kind of celebrating it. They're like, "Oh yeah, look, Trump, Elon Musk, blah blah." All these people were former Democrats. The Democrats won, haha. And it's like, I mean, I don't like that.
No, I don't like that at all. So now I have a choice between Democrats and rabid, frothing commies. That's not a choice.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's why they're getting the momentum they have, is because what is your alternative?
Yep, pretty much.
I don't like how am I getting called a rhino for not changing my opinions for the past 20 years?
There's nothing like getting called a rhino by somebody who voted for Obama twice. Like,
It was a diehard Bernie Sanders supporter.
You're not a real Republican like RFK Jr.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is like, it's like, oh, they're getting Dick Cheney to endorse Kamala. Dick Cheney, the war criminal. It's like, look, I have never really liked Dick Cheney. Never been a fan. Don't need to defend him. But which war crimes?
War crime. There's a definition of war crimes, and being involved in a war you didn't like is not one of them.
Yeah, it's actually ridiculously hard to be convicted of a war crime when you're not legitimately on the battlefield.
Yeah.
It's like you either have to be Yugoslavian or like really find a way to fucking make that happen.
And particularly Serbian.
Yeah.
That's not an accident. The people who wrote the laws about war crimes didn't want to be put in jail for them. So they're like, no, you can't just be a war criminal just for having your country go to war. That doesn't count.
Yeah. There's actually, to bring it back on topic, there's a lot of would-be war crimes that aren't, because the Soviets were really afraid that it was going to be used against them during their, years of bullshit.
There's an entire annex of the Geneva Accords that we did not really sign on to because it was designed by the Soviets to shield the savages that they had on a leash to work against the West.
And so I mean, like that was my thing of bringing up Cheney. It's like, I don't need to like the guy to not like just default to shitty Code Pink talking points. Like, there's enough legitimate reasons to dislike him that you don't have to make up new shit.
Yeah. Well, we seem to be making up new. Well, we're not necessarily so much making up new shit as we are repeating old shit that honestly probably in many cases wouldn't be repeated by the people repeating it if the different person was in the White House.
Yeah.
Which is even more aggravating.
It's a lot of that's just the nature of politics, though. It's I was for it before I was against it. Everyone dragged John Kerry for that. I mean, understandably, but they're kind of all like that to one extent or another. It's whatever the popular zeitgeist is. To some extent, they want to be on board, just because that's what the kids are doing. That's what gets them votes. So.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we do need to acknowledge that a lot of this is team sport politics, right?
Yeah.
It's, I think my guy is for this, therefore I'm going to be for this, even if I was against it 5 seconds ago. So
You
And
also have
that's on both sides. It's not just a fucking conservative thing.
you also have a lot of like it's kind of like team sports, but it's projection. You know, you assume like, well, I'm a Republican, so the Republican is for everything I'm for because he's a Republican. He's my guy. Well, you know, except for the things that he said or did that you might disagree with or that you vehemently disagreed with 5 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever, you know, sure.
8 years ago, you mean when Russia invaded the Crimean Peninsula?
Oh, that was
That was 10 years ago, actually.
Oh, that's right. It's 2024. Holy shit.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun.
You know, the Crimea was just sitting there, you know, asking for it.
Yeah, wearing that skirt.
Yeah, same with Georgia.
Yeah. Well, Georgia's a slut anyway, so.
I can't go buy a pack of smokes without running into 9 guys that Georgia fucked. No offense to Georgia out there. I'm talking about Georgia the country. Georgia the state, fuck you.
Yeah, so I actually apparently because I made a comment last night about Georgia and NATO. Actually, Georgia was under Saakashvili was trying to get into NATO, but fact of the matter is that not only were they not a member of NATO, even though they were sending troops to Iraq and Afghanistan as part of the coalition, but there is no way in hell Georgia is in any way a threat to Russian interests, given how it's something like what?
How lopsided that fight was. Yeah, being in ISAF is not the same as being in NATO.
Georgia has a population of 3.76 million.
Yeah, it was about 4 million in 2008, but yeah.
Yeah, just to put it in perspective, our Georgia is like way more advanced and populated than European Georgia or Caucasian Georgia, whatever you want to call it.
And in fact, prior to that, the Russians were encouraging the South Ossetians to attack Georgian villages in South Ossetia whenever they wanted to crack the whip, so to speak.
Yep.
The fact of the matter is that a lot of people adopt, and I think there's some groundwork that was already laid to trigger some of these reactions that, as I put it, I think I put it on Twitter this morning, way too many people bought into Fukuyama's bullshit. At the end, it was the end of history when the Soviet Union collapsed in 91.
Yeah.
Even though all sorts of shit happened in the 90s to kind of blow that thesis out of the water. Like, let's see.
Well,
the Balkans, the Gulf War, the Balkans, Somalia, the whole East Timor, whole lot of other stuff going on, including brinksmanship by the Chinese at the time when they were a lot less advanced than they are now. But we got this idea that the Soviet Union went away and just automatically, like flipping a switch, everything was different. And you saw it in media from Tom Clancy novels to movies to video games. We're always a Russian ally.
Yeah, there was later in the Clancy verse, I guess he had Russia joining NATO to stave off a Chinese invasion.
Yeah,
I read a couple books where the United States helped Russia in the event of a Chinese invasion. That was one of the campaigns in the Jane's ATF flight simulator, was that China invaded Russia and we were helping the Russians. I mean, China might invade Vladivostok at some point, but You know.
But the fact of the matter is, right now, China is,
Also, Jane's fighters just really wanted to give you access to Sukhois. That was that was generally it.
and I mean, hell, even more recently than that, Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising, the Marines are invading this fictional island to kick the Chinese off of it for the Russians. So, how much of that was just wishful thinking and how much of it was active measures is an interesting question.
Well, I think it was wishful thinking, but I think that wishful thinking was influenced by the people who were captured by active measures. Like, all right, Ted Turner, for instance, like how even before the Soviet Union fell, fucking Captain Planet had the Soviet Union chick who was always smarter and better than the American dude. Like,
and she was the only character who, in the little intro thing, had a specific country she was from. Wheeler was from North America. You know, Kwame was from Africa.
That explains why he's retarded. He's Canadian.
Soviet Union.
You guys watched a lot more Captain Planet than I ever did.
Hell yeah.
Well, yeah, I was like fucking 5 when it was still playing in like Saturday morning cartoons and shit. You had sworn off Saturday morning cartoons because you never received the USS Flag play kit under the Christmas tree.
He was burned. He was out there. Young Pete was out there just doing push-ups, punching logs.
I hate drawings. Just. You know what cartoon didn't? You know what cartoon did not have the Soviet Union? SWAT cats.
I should also just make a note that I have seen far less anime than anyone else in this stream as well. So,
yeah, but I'm not happy about that.
I think it's funny.
Yeah, but Mike, all right, so Mike watches like really shitty media on purpose, like as a hobby, right? Like that's why he's big into riff tracks, MST3K, and all that shit. So him watching anime is not that much different.
No, it really isn't.
I mean, I suppose I should clear the air on that. When I was younger, as in like starting about 20 years ago, I was more open to anime. Like mostly it was the stuff that was on Cartoon Network at one time or another. You know, Cowboy Bebop and Gundam and all that. The older I got, the less enjoyable I find it. It's got the same, like it has so many of the same like stereotypes and I don't want to say memes, but it's very samey. And it's because it's appealing to the same audience in Japan, you know, and it's like a lot of the things that make anime are the reason I don't like it that much anymore.
All right. Well, yes, I agree with everything you just said, and about 10 times more vehemently than you do. As an animation nerd growing up, like not anime specifically, but like animation, like I took that as the Votech school and all that stuff. Anime in the 90s and 2000s was kind of fucking trash. Like it was not to the same caliber as like a lot of Western animation, whether that be Disney, DreamWorks, Don Bluth, all that stuff. So the people that were really into it were all in my fucking class and they were all very annoying about it. So that's how I started drifting away because I grew up on fucking Dragon Ball Z. But the problem is when I grew up and anime was being introduced, we didn't even know it was Japanese because it was in English. Like Dragon Ball Z has a bunch of fucking Asian kanji and characters on it, but I thought it was because it was kung fu themed. I didn't fucking know this thing was made in Japan. They're like, so
I didn't know it was made in Japan. If I had, I would have hated it earlier.
Would have nuked my TV twice. But so like it wasn't specifically a weeb thing. That was the older generation that were like fan translating it and working at Suncoast and importing it and all that shit. To us, it was just like it was action cartoons and stuff like that. But as I got older and as more of that shit got produced and imported and that stuff, you started to see, I call it the weeb back loop, where it becomes more and more samey and very much in the the conventions that I fucking hated in early anime. You know, it's like the big eyes, the fucking wedge chin, and all that shit. I have said it before. I'll say it again. Nothing tackles mature content or mature subjects as immaturely as anime, and all of this is pushed forward by the fan base, specifically the fan base that autistically and obsessively buys all their shit and pays the most money for it. They want a certain kind of anime, and it's usually the kind of shit that like we make fun of 4chan for. It's like all the worst parts of anime, but now that's mainly what anime is becoming because there's a feedback loop. You know, the studios are going to be like, okay, this is what the audiences want. We're going to do this. And what the audience is the hyper obsessive weebs. That's why, like back in the day, like Cowboy Bebop doesn't look like Pokemon. It doesn't look like Dragon Ball Z. It does. Gundam doesn't look like some of these other shows. Like there was more variety in anime back there in visual style and all that stuff. Nowadays, everything kind of looks the same. It's like it could be done by the same studio.
And when you say it tackles mature topics immaturely, somebody will inevitably try to turn that around when you went, oh, what about this anime that's hyper gratuitously violent or has sexual violence or has
that's exactly what I'm talking
about. Like, that's serious, right? Like yeah. No, the gratuity is immature. You know, it's like slasher level of gore and just like, oh, look, he's sadistically ruining this character's life. Like that's not mature. Yeah. That's shock schlock.
Prioritizing jiggle physics on gigantic tits is not mature. It's an immature approach to a mature subject. So that's what I say when I mean that shit. Also, why, like, if you're gonna say anime is so adult, why the fuck are all the characters high school girls?
Yeah. Well, getting back to the subject
Speaking of high school girls, Russia. Just
yeah.
Or was that Gates? I don't know.
Probably both.
I'm sorry. I love the delay, so I get to sit back and watch.
As Mike is trying not to die, so this really kind of flared up with the Biden admin gave the Ukes permission to use some of our missiles to strike inside of Russian territory. Everybody started losing their minds. And then I've heard it was an ICBM. I've heard it was an IRBM. It was actually an operational test of a Russian missile without nuclear payloads into Ukraine. And everybody really started to lose their minds. Because Putin is rattling the nuclear saber, as he has been about every week for the last 3 years. And apparently, again, I'm hearing this almost exclusively from self-described conservatives. We're on the edge of Armageddon, and we have to give him everything he wants so that... and anything else is madness. This whole thing started because of weakness.
We can negotiate with terrorists just this one time, Pete.
Yeah.
No. Russia is not terrorist. They were provoked.
Also,
they were provoked by NATO existing.
Everyone is saying about we're using long-range missiles. The Ukrainians using long-range missiles. According to Wikipedia, the ATACMS, however they say that, it's the MGM-140 Army Tactical Missile System. The long-range variant has a range of up to 190 miles. Now, I get that that's a long way in Europe, but they maybe a lot of people are talking about this and they have no idea what the weapon systems involved even are. And yeah, apparently the Russians retaliated with a ballistic missile without physics package payload. It was a multiple independent reentry vehicle that just rained down solid slugs basically on some city in Ukraine. So it's like a conventional missile, except less accurate by a lot. And also, they had to call the U.S. and tell us they were going to do it, so they didn't accidentally trigger a nuclear response. Because launching an ICBM anywhere in the world is immediately picked up by satellites, and there's lines of communication between us and the Russians, and there have been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. So
guys, if it's going into space, it's being detected. Like that's.
And there's going to be at least a 30-minute warning if nukes are actually launched. Guess what's happening during that 30 minutes? More nukes are getting launched. Way more nukes are getting launched, which is why
I do like how everybody thinks that we don't have a strategic defense like capability. And that's not just like, oh, we can nuke them back and it's mutually assured destruction, or we can shoot down their nukes and all that shit. No, a shitload of the U.S. like intelligence community is based on like, hey, these motherfuckers with nukes, I want somebody like monitoring that shit 24/7 so that we know when they shoot nukes. Even in countries that like we really don't think they're going to launch a nuke. We have people doing it in Britain. So,
and just especially kind of, it wasn't quite the straw that broke the camel's back, but I think it might have been Bob Cruz who's in the chat right now. Saw the individual calling him with like conservative coach or something like that with a Reagan picture in his profile picture, wanting to knuckle under to Putin because nuclear Armageddon. Like, no, you know what you do when the Russians, I'm just going to start calling them the Soviets because they're still the Soviets, and Putin has been on record saying
the Soviet Union is gone. They're just Russians now, and they're completely different. That's why their president for life is a fucking former head of the KGB.
And that's why all of a sudden, oh no, that is he is not communist anymore. He is now oligarch in charge of another state-run enterprise. Same with that one, and that one. And that one.
Totally different, guys.
Totally different. In other words, they stopped parroting the bullshit because it's bullshit and it doesn't work, and just went with the practical authoritarianism. But Yeltsin was playing saxophone with Clinton, so it was all cool and everything was good.
I mean, it would have been nice if it would have worked out the way everyone hoped it would in the early 90s, but it didn't. Russia kind of collapsed and life got even worse for the Russians in a lot of ways, which that's hard to do. Living in Russia has pretty much always sucked. And that's how a situation like that is how you get a strong man like Putin who comes in and becomes president for life.
And Russians have been publicly pining for the days of Stalin since 91. And Putin's along with them. So
a lot of it is all the Russians who hated communism left, right? But the other thing is like Russians, everybody to an extent, but Russians especially, very like ego driven, right? So it doesn't matter that like their life still sucked in the Soviet Union. They were seen as a superpower. They were seen as mighty and something to be afraid of and respected, right? It's feared and respected and all that. And they had influence. And so like that perception, they want that perception, which is why they're backing whatever fucking, invasion and completely unprovoked attack on a neighboring country and all that stuff. That's why they kind of support it. And even then, that's not uniform. Like it's what they call the babushka demographic or the babushka vote. It's the older generation that's not going to get drafted and sent on these expeditions that overwhelmingly support that.
Isn't that what they always accuse the neocons of doing? Weird.
Somebody was posting on Twitter about how oh, you want to support Ukraine, but hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians fled rather than fight. Hundreds of thousands of Russians fled Russia rather than fight for the Ruski Mir.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands.
The NHL has been lit ever since.
Millions of Americans have never been in the military, even after 9/11, including probably the person who was making that comment. So it's like
almost guaranteed.
But yeah, that conservative coach guy, he brings up that prior to Russia invading Crimea, Ukraine had a Democratic elected president, Yanukovych, who much preferred relations to Russia to the EU and the US, specifically Victoria Nuland. Remember that name. Instigated a regime change because they didn't want Ukraine cozying up to the Russians. Okay, so a couple things with that. President Yanukovych, or however you pronounce his name, was democratically elected because he ran on the promise of integrating with the EU. Then he
turned around and changed his mind.
Yeah. While in office, whether it was, hey, a backroom deal with the Russians, or like they extorted him, threatened him, or he just ran on lies, who knows, he completely backtracked on that and cozied back up with Russia. And that started the Mailand uprising, where the Ukrainians overthrew or attempted to overthrow their government. And that has been revised and reimagined as a CIA coup, which guys, we're not that, the CIA is not that cool. And as I
said last night, if you think the CIA could overthrow a country on its own, you've been watching too many movies.
Yeah. And the other thing is he said chief, or specifically Victoria Nuland. So Victoria Nuland, she was high up in the State Department and all that stuff. The reason he's bringing up her name is because she made remarks during the Mailand uprising, not before, during, that said, hey, like the U.S. has invested a lot in democracy and westernization in the Ukraine, and that is a prerequisite for them getting closer to the EU and the Europeization of Ukraine, as it were. So all the Putin simps are using that as like a tacit admission that she instigated the uprising, and it was an American overthrowing of the democratically elected government in Ukraine.
Also,
that's like, hey, we gave you foreign aid, but you're still going to have to be like cooler with the West if you want to be cool with the West. That's all they're saying. And it's also like a rah, hey, cool, we like this Mailand uprising. That's not the same as instigating a fucking uprising, especially since the uprising was already going on when she said it.
And just so the audience is aware, there is no love lost between us and people like Victoria Nuland and the Obama foreign policy team.
Yeah.
Right? That's not, if we're coming to their defense, it's only because of what's true, not because we like these people, or good God, look what they've done. You know, it's.
But again, we're running into that team sports aspect where this person did something verifiably that I don't like, so therefore everything they touch is poison, which is one of the most childish perceptions. Now.
But a lot of this is why they're Putin simps in the first place, especially since like 10 years ago they were extremely anti-Russia, and they were so pissed off that during the debate with Romney, Obama was just like, "Oh, Russia's not our enemy anymore. It's not the Cold War. The Cold War's been over." You know, like, so they were pissed off about that, but now they fucking love Putin. And the reason that happened, or the catalyst for that transition, was because of the 2016 allegations that Trump won because of Russian interference and all that shit.
To some extent, it predates that. Actually, there was I've brought this up before, but I really noticed it probably around 2012. There was there was a concerted information operation aimed at the Patriot movement, the anti-Obama, the really rabid anti-Obama types in the U.S. And the Putin simping started then.
And
Fuck, I didn't get that newsletter. I thought I was really rabid anti-Obama, but
some of it was. I mean, some of it did like kind of stew in conservative discontent with President Obama because especially around then, conservatives felt like they were on the outs, even though they were slowly retaking government back from the 2008 shellacking they got. By 2012, they had, Romney lost, but they had retaken the House and the. No, they didn't get the Senate until 2014, but they were working on it. It was changing.
Yeah, a lot of it was like the Tea Party movement and that. So Obamacare didn't help that.
No, it did not.
Vitalized a lot of the conservative movement.
Obama was seen as a weak president on the world stage. He was bowing to the Saudi king, and he was, surrendering in Iraq. They said, and all this, and then whereas Putin very clearly put on the big strongman act. That's when you started seeing like the Putin memes popping up on Facebook and stuff.
Shirtless Putin riding a bear.
Yeah.
I do remember that. And so you're right. Like, this stuff was starting then, but what kicked it into high gear and made it, what I want to say is what made it mainstream was when the Democrats decided to say that, Russia stole the election for Trump, and that Trump is a Russian asset or a Russian sleeper agent or whatever the fuck, and he's a puppet to Putin and all that stuff. A lot of
intensely hypocritical.
Yes, a lot of especially considering that like the Russian interference went both ways, and the Democrats knew it. But as far as Trump getting elected, that wasn't because of the Russians. Russians were like discovered to have paid $10,000 for Facebook ads. That wasn't fucking spinning an election. But in the aftermath of that, Russia and Putin became the left's boogeyman for fucking everything. And so in order to fight back against that, people really started downplaying the Russians as an adversary to America, and specifically the Trump administration. And that carried enough momentum to kind of turn into like, oh, Russia's actually based. Like they're actually our allies, guys. Maybe the only reason you think Russia is the enemy is because you were told Russia was the enemy. It's like, nah, man, like fucking 2012, they were saying Russia wasn't an enemy. Like,
I mean, do any of these people remember the little hot mic incident between Obama and Medvedev?
After I'm elected, I will have more flexibility. He might as well have been saying it in fucking Russian.
I mean, the thing is like, I think for a lot of them, no, they don't. I think a lot of these people, at least the vocal ones, the very online ones you see on Twitter and other social media, like 2016 was the first election they paid any attention to because there was an outsider in it. A lot of them weren't even old enough to vote before that. So, no, this is all new to them. They have that's what history started in 2016 for a lot of these kids, I think, and they're just completely unaware of the entire political zeitgeist of the last 30 years before that and how it all led up to that moment.
Yeah, I do like the using statements. Remember what I was saying with Victoria Nuland and saying that statement is a provocation for Russia to invade Ukraine and all that. If statements are provocation, the war in Iraq was
Moscow
completely justified.
Yeah, we should be launching missiles on Tehran right now.
Yeah, we should have been launching missiles on Tehran decades ago.
They said death to America. I believe them this time.
Yeah. Pretty provocative, don't you think?
Well, just the recent thing with the missiles, and like someone who will remain nameless because I thought he knew better than this was saying that there are a bunch of warmongers salivating at the idea of a new global conflict. It's like, no, that's not how you act. That's not how you react to this sort of thing. You say, "Do it, faggot."
Yeah. Remember when Trump was
launch right now, pussy. You won't have a country tomorrow morning.
Remember when Trump was bitching North Korea out, and they were just like, oh, all the Dems were like, oh no, he's gonna start World War III. He's so unstable, and he's over there just being like, Kim Jong Un, you fucking rocket man, fuck you. Like, that's back then. All the same people who were being like, oh, all these warmongers, World War III is happening. They're just on the other side of the coin, because when our guy was doing it, it was fucking awesome, and it was like, yeah, that's right. You project strength. That's how you avoid war.
And
man, if only there was a sagely Latin phrase about, you know, how to ensure peace.
If only.
Yeah.
But,
It's Semper Fidelis, obviously.
Exactly.
We're all Marines out there.
You'll get peace eventually when everybody else is dead.
we make a desert and we call it peace.
Yeah, which guy? Everybody was complaining because the Marines were deployed to a landlocked country.
And he's gone. She'll always remember him like this.
Yeah.
In Afghanistan for so long.
Almost got him back.
Yep. But I like the kind of looks like Bradley Cooper in that freeze frame there.
I'm afraid to ask. Wait. Is it Bradley Cooper when he's using 10% of his brain or like 90% of his brain?
Does he ever?
Oh boy.
I don't know.
Yes, there are still people who should know better and will go unnamed, who still fall for that. We only use like 10% of our brain, dude. Like, talking point. Guys, like, no, you use 100% of your brain.
Most of these people have used psychedelics for therapy too. So,
if you don't,
not that there's really necessarily any connection there, but
if you
correlation.
If you don't think you need 100% of your brain, go read up on somebody who's lost a chunk of it. You know, there isn't like a part of it you can lose and still be okay. You know,
yeah. I've known somebody who lost a chunk of it. So yeah. But no, this entire escalation, I'm not going to call it a new war because it's not a new war. It started in 2014.
Yeah.
But the entire escalation that started almost 3 years ago now happened because of weakness. Because notice it didn't happen until after the absolute disaster in Kabul.
Yep.
And immediately thereafter, the buildup starts. China starts looking at Taiwan saying, don't think the Americans are going to help you because look at what just happened in Kabul.
Yep. Well, that's also, it's like, all right, people have pointed out that like now that Trump has been reelected and he's coming back in office, Putin's being like, oh, sweet, I am totally down for peace negotiations, that stuff. And they're like, oh, well, Trump's going to give Putin a big deal. It's like, no, he's putting on a front because he's like, oh, shit, yeah, that 4 years of fucking leeway we had, yeah, we don't have it anymore.
But before anybody gets too optimistic, if you think that even if there are peace talks, if you think that's going to be the end of it, you're out of your mind.
Yeah. There's something about Soviets and Russians is they're kind of sneaky about this shit. Very underhanded. Yep. Would not buy a used car from them.
And here's the problem.
Boris, the sneaky fucking Russian.
Here's the problem with like peace negotiations, and they say, well, Trump will bring peace. He's gonna make a deal. Like, okay. But in order for a treaty to mean anything, you have to be willing to enforce it. So Trump brokers a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. What happens if the Russians violate it? Because if the answer is nothing, they're going to violate it. So,
and they're going to find a way to violate it sooner or later. I mean, just you want an example of sneaky? It's 2014. It was obvious to the world that the little green men, the volunteers, were Russian army.
Yeah.
It was blatantly obvious. But they still lied to everybody about it until they couldn't anymore.
Wait, the Russians lying? That's crazy. Next, you're going to tell me that the accusations that the Ukrainians were genociding Russian-speaking citizens in Donbass or Donetsk, which was the provocation for the invasion in the first place, was a lie. Now, come on. Would Putin lie about something like that?
Shocking. I know.
I think my favorite retarded argument on this was the whole flap about the Ukrainian biolabs, right? Because first of all, apparently now, like supposed weapons of mass destruction are a justification for a military intervention again. Like, okay, thought we disagreed on that, guys, but okay. But
no. It's only because the WMDs in Iraq were totally fake, and I know this because John Stewart told me. But the biolabs in Ukraine are real because the Russians said so, and the Russians don't lie. They're not like CIA or anything.
Some anon on Twitter, I don't even know if he's anonymous, but he has a big account. Like said, I'm the one who blew out. See, he exposed the American CIA biolabs, and he found He found on the website for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency going back to like 2008 how we had we were doing research in there because they were worried about biological weapons in former Soviet states getting leaked. Like, guys, if it's a secret, sinister program, it's not going to be on the website.
Yeah. There were serious concerns back in even the 90s about weaponized smallpox in Russian labs.
And we had a whole thing with anthrax, too.
Mm-hmm.
20-some years ago that the kids are probably too young to remember, but...
There's a reason I got a smallpox vaccine in 2005 after smallpox was supposedly eradicated. And it wasn't necessarily just because of Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
And there's also the idea of like what is a biolab? What the fuck are you even talking about, right? My wife works in a biolab. I assure you the state of Minnesota does not have a biological weapons program.
There's a agricultural genetics lab in the company just up on the 287 up here that
I think you mean Black Mesa.
But it was funny though because they just took like something innocuous that nobody cares about, like Ditra, and spun it into like this secret CIA-backed biological weapons program that it's okay, it's secret, but it's also on the website where some rando on Twitter can look it up. You push that narrative by not defining you just call it, well, it's a biolab. Like, okay.
Yeah, and
chemicals that caught on fire. They were called like bio something,
and that's something that the propagandist and the conspiracy theorist, that's what they do, is they take little tidbits and they leave important details out. I don't know if I've said this on the stream before, but it's like Uncle Screwtape. That mortals think that we're always putting things into their heads, but in fact, our best work is done by keeping things out.
Yeah.
The way propaganda works is not to just completely make up bullshit a lot of the time, right? Yeah. That's not good propaganda. That's Baghdad Bob level of propaganda. Good propaganda understands what the people being targeted for are concerned about, and it plays on those concerns. There's elements of truth in there. Parts of it has to sound reasonable. Because if it's just like North Korean level stupid agitprop, it doesn't fool anybody.
Yeah.
Well, North Korea, it doesn't even fool the North Koreans, but
another
all addicted to porn thanks to being deployed to Ukraine. It's kind of fucking funny.
You're welcome.
They finally got access to the internet.
Another example of a similar sort of thing. Again, this was, I don't know, 2011, 2012, something like that. There's this big breaking story that Obama was going to bring Russian peacekeepers into the state of Georgia. And his proof was an order for all these AKs. Well, this guy was not the smartest peddler of propaganda because he left the header for foreign weapons courses for the U.S. military on the screen as he was showing this. But again, it's the same sort of thing. I'll find this innocuous little thing that seems out of place to me with my lack of experience and knowledge, and I'll blow it up into this big thing.
And even if that wasn't for FWS, like it's just as likely it was to sell to the cartels and have the ATF fucking.
I mean, if we were going to import a bunch of Russians to use as like mercenaries against, why wouldn't we just have them bring their own fucking guns? Why do we need to buy AKs separately? This stuff makes no sense if you think about it for 10 seconds. Like, I'm pretty sure the Russians have plenty of AKs of their own.
But again, this is all relying on that burst of adrenaline outrage.
Also, people
going to switch your brain off.
People like to feel like they're solving a mystery. You know, I'm sleuthing. I'm rapidly typing in that one scene in every movie where you're doing internet research and you just hear them clicking the keys. Like, what are you typing? Nobody knows, right? But you're figuring it out because the bad guys,
the text on the screen projects onto your face. Like,
yeah. The bad guys
are actors, man. Like,
they're leaving clues out there for you to find because they're sinister, but they're arrogant. You know, like, no, it doesn't work like that.
People watching too many movies.
You're not cracking the case.
Wasn't one of the best like counterintelligence things that like it was an enemy of Israel. I want to say it was like Pakistan or something. It's like one of the best and most successful counterintelligence programs they ever used was they just wrote things down and delivered things by courier. Like they didn't upload anything to the internet in regards to an operation or a weapons development program or something like that. And because of that, nobody knew that it was going on until it was too late. And it was like, what was your secret? How did you defeat us? Who encrypted your shit? And it was like, oh, we wrote it down and, carried it by hand.
They really, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda especially really leaned into that probably around the mid-aughts.
Yeah.
Because they were just getting, everything they tried was getting burned.
Once they figured out their Roshan phones weren't secure,
Yeah.
But so bringing up the WMDs, that keeps coming up as well, including somebody Coop was arguing with that there were none in Iraq. Like,
while claiming that there was a genocide of Ukrainian or like Russian-speaking Ukrainians in Crimea, which is why the Russians had to invade. So
first of all, there were still some. First of all, there were still some left, and some of our guys found them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got buddies who are still suffering the side effects of it.
I mean, you hear these arguments about you hear like contradictory arguments. Like, on one hand, it's the Ukrainians they're always been Russians. They're part of Russia. They just it's not a different country. They're all ethnic Russians. On one hand, they turn around and say, oh well, the Ukrainians are genociding the Russians in Crimea. Like, pick one.
Yeah.
As for again, it keeps coming back to the Iraq thing too, because it's a similar sort of thing where people have allowed themselves to be programmed into believing that their own country is evil and all of the dictatorships and terrorists are somehow the good guys fighting against the evil American empire.
Yeah. He may have been a communist, but Howard Zinn had some good points, okay?
But
I've had someone say that to me, it's like,
yeah, but he he didn't have good history.
Yeah. I mean, we have testimony that, Saddam had how much warning that we were coming for him?
Yeah.
Which it's not like there was a blockade keeping anything from leaving or entering the country, especially given the oil for food thing.
Yeah.
And the number of
the
weapons
UN had such a great time and very easy access to do their actual inspections prior to that, didn't they?
continual documented contacts between the Iraqi Mukhabarat and AQ throughout the 90s.
And hey, if the UN weapons inspectors, they didn't find anything, well, if Scott Ritter's word is, you know what, that's a man of unimpeachable integrity right there. Yeah. And those teenage girls totally set him up.
Same with
Gates. But many of those contacts were specifically for advice on poison gas. Again, like you mentioned, Coop, the constant interference with UN weapons inspectors. The fact that he had used chemical weapons multiple times. And so it very quickly got memory hold once the narrative needed to change, but multiple unconnected Iraqi defectors testified that Salman Pak was a terrorist training camp.
Yeah.
And some people, oh no, it's just a Mout facility. Like, that's funny. They weren't very good at Mout when we went up against them. So
yeah,
I think
AI
not to mention this, all the other connections kind of definitely lean into terrorist training camp.
So, which there are some additional points of that, and I'm not just trying to red pill people on WMDs, but
take WMD.
I do remember a lot of the arguments.
Pill, guys.
Yeah, it's a poison pill. But what you got? So do you remember when people were saying it's like, yeah, so we have like satellite imagery of convoys of WMDs being transported from Iraq to Syria. That's why we haven't really found too many in Iraq. And people will be like, oh, well, that's a cope. You're just lying. You're just trying to cover your tracks. Obviously, they're not there, blah, blah, blah. Nothing ever got transported to Syria. And then later, when there was the Syrian civil war, just magically, Assad had a shitload of fucking sarin gas to deploy on people.
In these high-level contacts, the former Iraqi senior officials grudgingly acknowledged that Saddam was not likely to return to power in Baghdad anytime soon. Therefore, Damascus decided to reduce the profile of its strategic cooperation with Saddam's Baghdad, particularly on issues pertaining to WMD. Toward this end, the Iraqi stockpiles then stored near Qamishli were now moved to permanent storage sites in central Syria and northeastern Lebanon. The moving and concealment of the Iraqi WMD were conducted under the command of General Zu al-Himma al-Shalish, a veteran of Syrian-Iraqi strategic cooperation and smuggling. Asaf Shaukat, Bashar's brother-in-law and deputy chief of Syrian military intelligence, personally supervised the undertaking. The first specific account of this action to transfer and hide of the Iraqi WMD was provided by Syrian opposition journalist Nazar Nayouf on the basis of detailed maps and notes he had received from a Syrian senior officer who had become a dissident. Several Lebanese, Syrian, and other Arab security and/or intelligence sources subsequently confirmed Nayouf's reports and provided additional details about the whereabouts of Iraq's WMD.
There you go.
But there were no WMDs in Iraq.
Well, no, because Curveball lied, remember? He described the VX gas from the rock, and it was all a lie. Even though, all right, intelligence agencies, no matter how incompetent you think they are, never use just one source, okay, without
one source with no source.
Yeah. So, and that's something that people point to. It's like, oh, this one source lied, and they were so keen on going into Iraq and justifying it that they only used one source. No, the reason the fucked up reporting from what is now known as Curveball is such a big deal, and why the intelligence agencies went along with it is because even by itself, while it was not reliable, it corresponded with all the other sources they have and had to indicate that there was a WMD program in Iraq and all that stuff. And the other thing is, if one source being false, isn't enough justification, one source out of many being false is not, proof that it's all a cover up and all a lie anyways. So, it just leave your preconceptions from, what the media was telling you while you were growing up away. Like come at it with a fresh pair of eyes and actually like go looking for the evidence, and it might surprise you, and that it's not just what the public zeitgeist is right now. So
Now, the
But
public
you have-
zeitgeist
that being
is,
said, there's way more evidence for Iraqi WMDs than there ever were for a fucking concerted genocide of Russian-speaking Ukrainians in Crimea.
One of the talking point too, that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was provoked by NATO expansion, right? Because we told them we wouldn't expand NATO, and then we did. Like, yeah, a lot of countries in Eastern Europe wanted to join NATO because they were scared of the Russians invading them, because most of them were under the Soviet boot for 60 years.
Yeah.
But also,
Plus, as I brought up, which if a new country joining NATO, west of or east of West Berlin is the red line in the sand, how come y'all didn't invade Poland?
now,
Poland's sitting there right now. I wish a motherfucker would.
Yeah.
so
Give me some F-22s, please, Uncle Sam.
you have that talking point on one hand being pushed by people like Tucker Carlson and all of his Moscow simps that fucking, and some of them like literally paid by the Russians, like
Yeah.
Colonel Douglas McGregor is a RT hack,
Yeah.
Russia Today pundit. But then when he did his interview with Putin went on this big rambling thing, yammering about what happened in the 1300s or some shit, and how it's always been part of Ukraine's always been part of Russia. Well, those two things are not compatible. Either it's always been part of Russia and they're rightfully reclaiming their territory, or it was a provocation. You can try to twist that and like, oh well, they were going to let it slide until we provoked them. I'm like, oh sure.
They tried to. Ukraine and Kievan Rus definitely tried to join NATO in the 1300s. So.
Yeah. Well, there was a rivalry between Kiev and Rus and Muscovy for a long time.
Yeah.
This again.
Wait.
he's
Okay,
a-
are you telling me this is like age-old cultural fucking grudge matches and vendettas rather than seriously a geopolitical red line in the sand of a neighbor joining NATO because you're being a dick to them?
Hey, look, all I'm saying is like, they promised that Ukraine would never try to join the Holy Roman Empire, and they reneged on that. So
just the mindset that we should leave all of those people to live under the boot because we don't want to have another war. Not to mention the whole, I'm seeing increasingly, I guess the whole Nazi narrative has finally been kind of put aside because it didn't hold up.
Yeah.
There were some neo-Nazis in Azov early on. You know where else you could find a lot of neo-Nazis? Wagner Group.
And every country in Europe also.
Yeah.
And South America for some reason.
Europe has neo-Nazi groups that put anything that happened in the U.S. to like reverse shame, right? They are hardcore about it. It is like you have like Nazi death metal bands in like Scandinavia. It's bizarre. It makes no sense. It's European. We don't worry about that because that's their Euro bullshit over there. But also, that was always great for me, seeing some internet anon with a Pepe the Frog in an SS uniform as his avatar, clutching his pearls about the Azov Nazis. Like, yeah, bro, I tell you, real broken up about that.
You know what's funny though?
Once Azov got folded into the Ukrainian army, they cleaned house. Whereas Wagner is still Wagner, and that's a very Russian name, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's hilarious because Russia kind of cleaned house, but just mainly on the leadership that was attempting a coup.
And that's the only reason they cleaned house.
And by cleaning house, you mean they swept it out the window?
Without a parachute,
or flew it into a mountain.
Yeah, but the other thing, I find it hilarious that, like, because Mike's right, there are all these cringe little neo-Nazi groups in Europe and that shit. When you go into like Scandinavia and that stuff, you'll see a lot in Sweden and Norway, right? Both were taken over by force by the Nazis during World War II, and there are some holdouts. Finland joined willingly with the Nazis because the Soviets were on the other side. They just fucking hated Russia that bad, right? And so they were just like, oh, you're fighting the Ruskies? Hey, we'll fucking join you. No need to invade us. We'll be your ally. We're doing this willingly. Post World War II, they're just like, yeah, I don't give a shit about the Nazis. Like there aren't too many neo-Nazi groups coming out of Finland, out of all the three main Scandinavian countries. And it's because Finland just hates the Russians. It's not because they like the Nazis. They just hate the Russians.
And also, there was a point after the continuation war, because the Soviet Union invaded Finland again during the middle of the Second World War. Like they were in a life or death struggle with the Germans who almost made it to Moscow, right? But Stalin still found time and resources to invade fucking Finland again, right? Because that's this kind of dude.
You're telling me this has to do with age-old cultural grudge matches and rivalries?
Right. So yeah, the Finns like took help from the Germans because they were like, "Hey, you're getting invaded by our enemy. Here's a bunch of weapons and ammunition." But then at the end of the war, after they signed the ceasefire or whatever, some Germans dragged their feet getting out of Finland. The Russian and the Finns fucking attack them too. That was part of the plot of that movie, Sisu.
Yeah. Still haven't seen that one, but
the Finns are just on another level, man. Like, it's not the best level, but it's another level, and it's entertaining as fuck to watch.
Wait, Internet Pencil next. We're talking shit about Simo Haya.
I haven't seen it. Maybe you have.
I haven't either.
I have not either. No.
But nobody talks shit about Simo Haya.
Yeah, the closest I've heard, as far as shit talking goes, is like the fat electrician who's not shit talking Simo Haya. But he's like, hey, compared to Carlos Hathcock, like they were doing two completely different things, and one is a lot easier to rack up a high confirmed kill count versus the other.
Yeah.
So.
But
Rick, Finland's fucking fun. I like you don't even have to go to Helsinki. Even Tampere is fun. It's go in the summer when it's like fucking you got the sun out until like 11 and it's not just fucking freezing cold. So
well, all but yeah, seriously though, friggin' before anybody had even heard necessarily of Azov, Wagner was just full of this weird Russified sort of neo-Nazism.
Yeah.
That they were like the Nazis tried to do the whole, and I think that's where the Wagner name even comes from, more than likely. This, as far as I know, they're still very much there. There's still this whole weird sort of neo-pagan Slavic sort of shit going on in there.
Yeah.
And let's not forget that
it turns out that
as a complete aside, I entered in response to Rick's comment, I entered Holy Roman Empire Batman into an AI art generator, and this is what I got. So enjoy.
That's just Batman.
It's just Batman.
Yeah, but there's like Gothic Cathedral. That could be Gotham City, though. You know, that's how they.
I was gonna say Gotham is enough of like a fantasy fucking city, anyways, that it already has that kind of architecture.
But
you just stole a panel from a Batman comic.
I didn't steal it. The Dream AI app did.
No, I've been told that that's not how AI works.
But Yeah, let's also not forget that Wagner attacked U.S. troops as a probe in Syria during the Trump administration
How'd that work out
and
for them?
got an absolute mud hole stomped in their ass. And that was a probe. We know now they were okay. If we push the Americans, what's going to happen?
And
Oh no, that happened. Oh no.
500 dead Russians later.
some of the same people bitching about this now were all excited about that then because their guy looked good. Like, no, Trump did the right thing. We should definitely, if the Russians or anybody else try to do a probing attack on our forces, we should definitely fucking slaughter them by the bushel, right?
But that'll provoke war.
Well, if you're attacking our troops, you've already started the war.
Yeah.
Bullets are flying.
It's not just boats. It's Americans.
Yeah. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
You try to kill Americans, you pay the fucking piper. And there are all these. Well, we have no interest in Ukraine. Actually, yes, we fucking do. And it has nothing to do with money laundering or any of this other shit. It is. This happened because of a perception of American weakness. We let it continue to happen, and that perception is going to get stronger, and things are just going to get worse. You think that life now is bad? Wait until you're living life in the Ruski Mir, the Russian world. It's going to really suck then.
Yeah,
You
especially
can have them at your feet or at your throat. Those are your choices.
Especially with them and China being fucking allies.
Yeah. The based Russians. Like Russia, Communist China, North Korea, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Venezuela, Cuba.
Assadi and Syria.
I'm not seeing a whole lot of traditional Christian Western values there. I'm seeing a lot of communism and a lot of just general revolutionary fanaticism.
Yep.
Setting aside from a moment for the fact that a lot of people who are involved in the intellectual post-liberal movement do simp for communist China. They just wish it was if President Xi was baptized Catholic, they think it was the greatest country in the world, right? If they changed nothing else. But setting that aside,
I mean, it'd be an improvement, but he has to actually act Catholic.
Yeah, that's the hard part, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's too busy trying to. He's too busy trying to change the Bible to include his sayings.
Yeah. Oh, that's
it too.
Joe Biden was baptized Catholic too. Look how that worked out.
For some reason, that argument, it's like the argument of civic nationalism versus the ethno state. Well, we can't. People will take oaths and they won't be loyal to the civic ethos. Well, we have a white Catholic as a president right now. How's that working out for you? Was he not loyal to the ethos of his skin color? I guess is it weird?
No, but he is loyal to the Pope.
People just do whatever the fuck they want. It's like it's like.
Now, he's not loyal to the white race, but he is loyal to the Vatican. He's just playing the fool right now, but it's all set up. The new crusade starts now.
The Empire of the Empire of Our Lady of Guadalupe or something.
Yeah. No, everybody's arguing about whether Israel belongs to the Jews or the Palestinians. It belongs to Rome, damn it.
With the distance in the background, I can hear the big computer in the Vatican doing its computations.
Dude, I mean, like, as much as I enjoy the crazy, wacky conspiracies about like the secret, Jewish conspiracies and the elders of Zion and all that shit, it's like, I'm like, where have I heard these all before? Oh yeah, it's all the conspiracies that like the Protestants during like the 50s had about the Catholics, and it's like they were afraid John F. Kennedy was gonna like fucking dissolve the Constitution and hand the U.S. over to the Vatican or some shit like that. Like, it's like, bro, the Italians weren't even gonna do that. Like,
it's funny because then you have like people like Professor Adrian Vermeule talk about how the integralization from within. Kind of sounds like a conspiracy there, Adrian. Like, Are you receiving instructions from the big Vatican computer?
I am, but the instructions are unclear, and I'm not going to say how I found that.
Like
it's written in DOS and Latin. What the fuck?
There's a teletype machine printing out this old tiny stock ticker behind it. Like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Like, it's all dots and it's all just dots. What am I supposed to do now?
Yeah, Morse code doesn't translate to Latin very well, turns out. So.
No, it's not. It's not even Morse code. There's no dashes. It's just dots.
Oh. Is it Braille?
But yeah, the just
keep going. I just thought of something. I thought of a relevant meme for what you said.
But yeah, the idea that somehow we need to just withdraw from everything because it costs too much. Never mind the fact that all the domestic spending and pork barrel dwarfs any defense spending by a lot. Even at the height of the GWAT, it was almost the 2/3 of federal spending was all on welfare and subsidies, which is not an actual federal, constitutional federal friggin'
and that hasn't
priority.
That hasn't.
No, it hasn't.
I think as of now, our interest payments to the national debt exceed the defense budget. You know, and
I believe it.
So yeah, it's guys like the people say we're bankrupt. You know, we're bankrupting America to give weapons to Ukraine. Well, number one, I thought it was gay when they had the what if teachers got all the money they needed, but the Air Force had to hold a big sale to buy a bomber bumper stickers back in the 80s, 90s, right? Like, do we really need to bring?
You know what? Here's the thing, though. I expect the Air Force to throw a fucking baller ass bake sale if they're trying to get a bomber.
I have had Air Force baked goods, and you know what? They were great.
Yeah, something tells me the baked goods aren't going to be the main drawing point.
There were snacks, and it was comfortable, and nobody screamed at me for the most part.
No. Here's how the Air Force would raise money through a bake sale. You'd go to the bake sale, they'd give out, or sell little, pastries and that shit. And then they'd be like, hey, we're having an auction and whoever bids the most money gets to go blow that fucking naval boat up with one of our fucking, B-2s. Like who wants to? We got the B-1, we got the B-52. You all get to fucking bid on which weapons platform you want to run and fucking blow up that damn Navy ship.
I wish
and fucking people would do. You think Elon Musk, as much as he's like, yes, I'm trying to make the government more efficient, he would also be like, that's fucking awesome. I want to do that shit. Joe Rogan would jump on that shit in a heartbeat. Okay.
Joe Rogan and Elon Musk.
Yeah.
That's a Flash Kids cartoon.
What's up?
It's a Flash Kids cartoon. Joe Rogan and Elon Musk is like Rick and Morty.
Yeah. But yeah, it is very telling that all these people screaming about aid for Ukraine, it's always defense that needs to get cut. None of these people are addressing any of the other garbage that we're spending money on.
I mean, some of them might sometimes, but it's like, Trump. Trump isn't a fiscal conservative. He's been denying on the campaign trail that he plans to gut Social Security because he doesn't. That's a tired old Democrat talking point that doesn't apply to Trump, right? There's no political will right now to cut entitlements. It's not going to get fixed until it becomes unavoidable anymore. And that's going to be a rough stretch of years when that happens. But
it's going to have to happen. But there's no way you can get elected while promising to do that in the first place. And if you do it, you better go in planning to be a one-term president. People like their entitlements, especially if they've been paying into it their entire fucking lives because they were told that's how the system works.
Trump would be perfectly positioned to start doing that if he was inclined to, but he's not. He's not like a Rand Paul fiscal hawk. And again, this is going to make people try to project what they want onto somebody else. You know?
Yeah.
No, but I will say, Pam Bondi, way hotter than Matt Gaetz. I'm sure it would be different if I was a 16-year-old girl, but
I love you. You know that.
You can Venmo me later.
Oh,
Like a student loan payment. I'll put that on the memo line there.
holy shit. But
since there's an
I think the thing I think one of the things that really bugs me the most, though, about all of this is just the assumption, in some cases by veterans, that, well, the youth should just give up. They're outnumbered. They should just they can't win. They should just give up. Would you give up if it was your country?
Yeah, that sounds a little bitch made to me.
It's really bitch made.
These are the same guys that'll blast songs from Sabaton about the Swiss Guard defending the Vatican, right? Yeah, they should have just gave up. It wasn't even their church, right?
Yeah.
I mean, well, it was, but I mean,
the sheer mentality of cowardice is sickening.
Yeah, I mean, that's all there. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's also a refusal to admit you're wrong, because a lot of these same people that are saying, "Oh, they should just give up, it's hopeless," were saying that in the first week of the conflict, and we'd be like, "Oh, Ukraine's not going to last 2 weeks. Well, Ukraine's not going to last a month. Well, Ukraine's not going to last the next 3 months. Well, Ukraine's not going to last through the end of the year." There's over and over and over again. Every time Russia failed, I was being told by somebody I used to respect that it was like really fucking 12D chess, fucking strategic, genius, and what they were going to do next was it for the Ukrainians. It's like
I look forward to the day that'll never come when people on the internet stop thinking that some person or entity publicly stepping on his dick and fucking up is somehow a plan, part of it. There's no plan, okay? They didn't mean to do that. That's not a ruse. They just fucked up. That is the simplest explanation.
If they planned to step on their dick, they'd be charging you for it, and then it wouldn't be on Twitter.
Yeah, but
Just it's also the kind of they want to spark World War III. Like, who the hell is they?
Yeah, that's something.
Nobody's that in control. It's on the same level as it's on the same level as the CIA overthrowing the Ukrainian government in 2014. Nobody's in control like that.
That's the same. That's one of those Tucker Carlson-esque talking points. We talk about they, like who is they? Can we define they? Like, how are they going to benefit from a nuclear exchange that you say is coming between?
No, you don't get it. They is just their pronouns. It's actually one guy. He's just fucking.
Yeah, global homo is one person. It's just there's one
guy behind it.
Global homo is one pencil neck weirdo.
Yeah. He really does have a neck like that, and like the fucked up limbs. Oh,
but it's like it's on the same level as I've seen somebody say, and again, someone who will remain nameless, that even the history's curated. How? Tell me you've never actually studied history without telling me you've never actually studied history. If you think that somehow history itself could be curated to say something that didn't actually fucking happen.
And they're also
because if it's a conspiracy and everything is in somebody's control, and you have come across it and deciphered and discovered this grand conspiracy, that makes you somewhat important and somewhat relevant to this grand conspiracy, because now you can tell people about it, and you're smart enough to have figured it out. If nobody's in control and shit just happens, and yeah, people are like making efforts to do things and that stuff, but they're not omnipotent, and it's constantly coming across against other competing stuff. and mistakes are being made and all this. If everything is crazy and people are stupid, then you trying to connect the dots together are equally as stupid. And you're just fucking trying to detect patterns out of random bullshit.
It's especially galling when they do this with World War II, right? The most written about and researched conflict or possibly event in all of human history. There has probably not been one single thing that has had more attention paid to it than fucking World War II, right? But now, 70, almost 80 years later, you got some internet retards who are coming on like, oh, actually, there's a secret history about this, and Winston Churchill was the greatest villain, and Hitler wanted peace. Like no, they didn't hide anything about World War II from you. You just weren't paying attention in class.
I mean, I just like that the idea that Hitler wanted peace when his platform was based on conquest. It was very Napoleon-like, where in order to keep the public happy, he had to conquer more and more land and territory and convert it to the Nazi German way. Like that was baked into Nazi fascism. It was baked into all fascism, actually. Even the Italians tried it, but they weren't ready to kick off that expedition, which is why they were caught kind of unaware when Hitler did that. So.
But yeah, it's like they were like, well, Hitler was fighting communism. Yeah, he was. That's why he made a pact with Stalin and divvied up Poland, right?
He was and then turned west.
Yeah, and then invaded France.
Look, I call the French commies, but that's kind of a stretch in this.
Yeah.
I mean, the French don't. You say they're French. That's sufficient cause for war.
You don't have to go full like, oh, they're communists too. It's like you had me at French. I mean, you don't have to.
Historically, in European history, being French was a cause for at least one or two countries to go to war with you.
And sometimes two of those countries would be France.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, a lot of the case is there to be made that the French Revolution was the predecessor to the Bolshevik Revolution. In fact, Lenin straight up made that connection. Lenin claimed that the Bolsheviks were the inheritors of the French Revolution. And the more you look at the French Revolution, yeah, it matches.
Especially since Lenin and Marx and all of the founders of the Soviet Union and communism and all that shit were studied and practiced this stuff in Germany, and then were sent by the Germans during World War I into Russia to destabilize the Russian Empire, so that they would get taken out of World War I.
And that's not the only thing that can be laid at the Kaiser's feet, because he was encouraging jihadi uprisings in British holdings in the Middle East at the same time, and in fact was proclaimed a defender of Islam.
Yeah, turns out the Germans have always sucked.
This all feeds into my theory, my overarching theory of history, that Germans are history's greatest criminals that have never been sufficiently punished for their crimes because Germany still exists somehow.
Yeah, there's a reason we call them Germany, because they're a disease.
See, the Romans even called it even before germ was a word.
Yeah. Well, the germs are named after Germans.
Before germ theory, we had the German theory, and it was just as bad.
If somebody
why is everybody getting sick? Well, because of the Germans. That's why.
If somebody out there by chance who is German is seeing this and is upset, you deserve this because you're a monster. I'm kidding. It's all
it's not fun. That I hate you. It's that I don't trust you with any authority or power whatsoever for the rest of your life.
Making train jokes about Germans in the Frankfurt airport was interesting.
Yeah. Oh, the funny part is,
Fortunately, nobody hurt us, but
the Germans don't actually learn. Like yeah, they'll be like, oh no, we totally fucked up in World War II. We're not like that anymore and that shit. But as soon as the government says hey, you're gonna do this because the state tells you to, they're like, absolutely. Why wouldn't I do this? And the German way is the best way. Everybody should be like Germany. And it's sounding a little German over there. We need to watch out. They never learn. They never change.
Everybody wants to be like Germany, but do we have the pure strength of will?
Yeah. Oh, it's a sad reality, but the Germans are perpetually just the worst.
A lot of stuff that evolved into the current woke shit, right? Critical race theory, critical theory in general, but especially the race-based critical theory, you can trace that all the way back to German philosophers and their what is it, Volk romanticism or whatever?
Yeah.
They had their own
critical theory
of nationhood and race. And
critical theory came from the Frankfurt School, which
Frankfurt where?
I only know of one.
It's not Frankfurt. Yeah, in Kentucky it's Frankfort. So I don't know if it's spelled the They changed the name because they didn't want to be associated.
Yeah, they're that's a little too German for us. Fuck you. But no, it unfortunately it really just stems back to not the creation myth, but the way that the Germanians became the culture that you know them as today. There's just for thousands of years they were basically founded on cultural autism, and Germany is culturally autistic, and it's built into them. And I mean, I'm not saying it's not inherent to them. If you took a German kid when they're 2 and moved them to the US and raised them there, they're not going to end up like a German, right? It's not.
My adopted son never smiles. I don't understand.
Why are you so blind?
How many Germans does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Don't they have to reinvent the light bulb first?
One, because we are efficient and do not have humor.
Yeah. But what's the word I'm looking for? But it's not like a genetic thing, right? It's not like
it's the culture.
Yeah, it's just the German culture and how it has existed for centuries. It just beats that into somebody. I've been looking for it for years since I first saw it, but there was a study and a survey that compared U.S. Respondents, British respondents, and German respondents, and it was how much do you agree with this and that and the other thing. One of them was, no, you misspelled porn. But which got it was the state is most often correct and you should do what they say, and you value stability over freedom, right? Now the Brits, and they've probably changed since then, but the Brits were kind of middle of the road, but generally on the side of no, freedom is a little bit more important. Americans very much they fucking hate the state. Even the respondents were just nope, freedom all the way, fuck yeah, 1776. The Germans, holy shit, they were just no, the system, structure, and stability is way more important than individual freedom, by a lot. This was a significant margin. And you're just man, you guys have not learned, have you?
German guy, I guess, went viral on Twitter for saying, well, in Germany, we do not pay into the charity. We pay taxes and the state takes care of the poor. Bro, calm down. You don't start rolling tanks over it,
That's not how charity works. You're taking the charity part out of it. But yeah, no, I'm telling you, Germans are just culturally autistic. Why do you think they were so obsessed with trains for the longest time?
And again, the train jokes just write themselves.
Oh God!
The boxcar. I mean, the train car.
And you guys thought we were just going to be talking about Russia.
No, we're talking about all the shit.
Notice I said geopolitical peanut gallery, not just Russian peanut gallery.
Going back to there's something a point I do want to make about Ukraine, though. I mean, a lot of this perception and the divide on this has been fueled by the fact that Ukraine was a very corrupt, like comically corrupt country, right?
Oh yeah, one of the most.
And they had like Hunter Biden getting paid off by one of their gas conglomerates or whatever, and like that all happened too. But that doesn't mean that the whole thing where it's just a money laundering operation. Like how does that work? Like we're giving them artillery shells. How is that laundering money? It's
and I will say like the support that the U.S. has given them has been mismanaged, and a lot of money has been unaccounted for. And
but we do that in our own wars too. Yeah. That's not unique to Ukraine.
But yeah, that goes back to what we were saying earlier, where it's like, this person or politician is shitty enough that I don't have to make up new things about them to not like them. I don't have to make up conspiracies about Ukraine to, and the other thing is like none of those actually do justify the invasion. Like people were trying to paint it as like it's like, oh well, both sides are pretty bad. It was like, yeah, Ukraine is corrupt as shit. Russia also corrupt as shit, but only one invaded the other, right?
Yeah.
So,
and again, getting back to the whole slobbering over Russia as being some sort of exemplar of a good society. It's got one of the highest suicide rates in the world. I'm pretty sure it does have the highest abortion rate in the world.
And also alcoholism, surprising no one, right? But
which it actually probably explains some of the craziness because they're all drunk all the time.
I honestly think
it will explain their tank effectiveness.
I honestly think that one of Russia's motivations for invading Ukraine was they're trying to bolster their population because they are looking at demographic collapse because they're not having babies. They're not having babies. So, the Japanese are not having babies. It's just
the South Koreans have it the worst, like to the point where they might not actually be a country soon.
I mean, Russia will still be there, but the ethnic Russians aren't going to be the majority anymore. It'll be like
the Inuits.
Probably not, but
the Yupiks will rise up.
The Tartars and the guys from what am I thinking of? The Muslim guys.
Kazakhs, Uzbeks.
Yes, they'll be the ethnic majority eventually if things go the way they are. That's the problem with having an ethno-state, by the way, which Russia is not. The Russian Federation is not an ethno-state.
So, I think the book I was reading was written in 1949. And at the time, Russia and Soviet Union had a population of about 190 million. They now have a population of less than 145 million. And that's in just over half a century.
They never recovered from the people they lost in the First and Second World Wars. And
wait, who?
Russia.
The Russians?
Not to mention all the people they killed themselves.
No, yeah. I'm sorry. We're talking about Soviets, and you said they lost people.
Yes.
When asked, what does it feel like to take a human life, he said, I wouldn't know. I've only ever killed communists.
So, but that kind of, a century or more of just destruction, it's hard to come back from that. And I don't think annexing Ukraine and Georgia is not going to reinvigorate the Russian bloodline. So I do believe that was a motive. I don't have any evidence for that. That's just my personal opinion. I think that was on their mind, but I don't think it's going to work.
I think for the most part,
you conquer a people, they don't necessarily want to be on your team and have babies with you. It's weird.
Although there are reports of mass trafficking of Ukrainian kids to Russia to be Russified,
Yep. And which got
which figures. I mean, you look at like there was the Bucha massacre that a lot of the Russia Sims were claiming, oh, that the Ukrainians staged it. Well, what's that Delta guy's name on the Anti-Hero podcast? Brent Tucker.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Which I'm 90% sure isn't actually his real name. He's just really good
Probably
at
not,
trade.
but
yeah.
But yeah, he was actually talking not too long ago that he was on the ground there ahead of doing some high risk extraction ahead of the Ukrainian lines, and he saw the bodies with their hands tied behind their back, shot in the back of the head, and the Ukes hadn't been there. So,
I also think some of Ukraine's corruption problems got cleaned out a little bit once the war began, because it's all fun and games being corrupt in peacetime, but when you're comically corrupt in wartime, suddenly it's treason. And I think some of that probably got cracked down on pretty hard. And I'm going to go ahead and say Eastern European countries don't have the best protections for the accused and rule of law like we do over here. So good luck with that.
But to Mike's earlier point that the countries you conquer generally don't want to have babies with you. I'm not 100% sure that the Russians know that, like the actual Russians on the ground doing shit. Because when they first invaded, one of the biggest OPSEC failures that they ran into was because everybody had their phones. Like, it's not like in GWAT where it's just like, nope, that needs to be locked up because you're not allowed to have this shit because the Taliban can read all your fucking text messages and that stuff. No, so they actually brought their phones because they're all Zoomers, right? Well, the Ukrainians were catfishing invading Russians by like pretending to be like some fucking OnlyFans model and that shit on dating apps and being like, hey, if you're Russian, come find me because I want to, hook up with a real Russian man, not like these Ukrainian, pussies and that shit. And so the Russians was like, oh shit, this is going fucking awesome. They want it. And so they would fucking respond and link up with these through chat with these catfish accounts. And the catfish accounts were Ukrainians that were geolocating the Russians on their phones using the dating apps and that shit and all the metadata, and then launching airstrikes on them, or like setting up ambushes for these guys and going and capturing these motherfuckers and just decimating a lot of the invading forces on Russians. So the Russians might believe it, like it might be part of the propaganda that they've bumped in. It was like, oh yes, everybody want Russian.
There was that Russian army recruiting commercial. You got two Russians in the trench, and I think they're both wearing like American-looking multicam too, which is hilarious.
Yeah, but the Russians have kind of like ripped it off from us.
They're talking about how they're going to have like, this nice apartments in Kiev or something like that. I don't remember.
I want real estate in Donetsk and all that.
They're honestly just like promising them conquest, which that's classics right there. That's going back. But you know what? It's not. It's not two Russian soldiers in a recruiting ad discussing why we can't let NATO expand. So, or Ukrainian biolabs.
All of that shit was intended for the West.
Yes, very much so.
Which makes people falling for it that much more pathetic.
Somebody should do a podcast stream about that.
Guys, the proper response to propaganda is not to believe the opposite of whatever the propaganda is. That's not smart. That's retarded. Okay? That's because propaganda will have truth in it. So you can't just turn around and say, oh, well, if that's propaganda, then everything, well, you know where that leads.
Yeah. But that's the zeitgeist now is I've detected some falsehood over here. So therefore, over here must be the gospel truth.
Yeah.
The government lied to me
About COVID.
So I'm going to throw out all credulity and common sense and believe whatever piece of low energy, low effort foreign propaganda comes across my computer screen.
Also,
to own the libs.
Everybody like tried to cover up that COVID came from a Chinese lab, right? So, but the Ukrainians have biolabs, so they're trying to hit us with new COVID that's actually going to be effective, because COVID was really like the flu or the cold. It wasn't really a plague. We just treated it like one. But the ones in Ukraine, those are real. So, and nobody can keep their own fucking conspiracy straight.
I think even RFK Jr. got in on this. Said
I
something
can't.
Where they were trying to make a.
I can't believe that RFK Jr. has said anything crazy.
No, he said they were.
No, he did because he didn't say it. The brainworm said it.
I think he said something to the effect where like COVID was engineered to not affect the Chinese and Jews.
The Chinese were some of the hardest.
The Chinese lost more people than anybody else.
Millions of Chinese died from COVID. They were welding people.
Once again, we're talking about communist China. They lost the most automatons out of anybody. Like,
communist people.
I also think instead of calling him RFK Jr., we should just here on out refer to him as Hypnotoad. Bro, and guys, anybody in the chat who's getting mad at this, I actually like some of his ideas. I'm all red pilled on seed oils, bring back tallow, all that shit. But that's some of his ideas. Other ideas, I'm like, okay, good luck with that. Like, and no, that's retarded.
I like his ideas that end up accidentally being like super conservative, like how he wanted to defund the AMA. Like Milton Friedman's winning in the end there, guys. Let's go for it.
So, but yes, Hypnotoad has one or two good ideas, but I'm very much hoping that Trump had a good appointment for like the head of the FDA and therefore like the undersecretary to Hypnotoad, and like hopefully he kind of like straightens him out and just be like yeah, we should get rid of unhealthy ingredients and that shit. That's not an unhealthy ingredient. That's just our scientific way of saying salt. Move on. Okay, red dye 40, yeah, that's gone. Riboflavin, no, that's a thing. Like
you
that's
need
not
riboflavin to live, guys.
Yeah,
I mean,
so just because you like have or you give the scientific name of like a protein or something doesn't mean it's the same thing as like a lab grown chemical for the sake of preservative factors and shit like that. Like, take each piece of information on its own. Don't lump everything in together with like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater is what I'm saying. But also tallow is 100% superior to seed oils.
But, and here's the thing, though, like a lot of this was adopted because of health scares in the 80s and 90s about like trans fats and like trans fats and how like, and cholesterol and all that. That's, we just stop jerking it around, like.
You know who doesn't have trans people or fat people? The Russians, because they're based.
I don't know if that's what trans
I'm pretty sure they have both, but
yeah, I was going to say. Well, they're also not based, but everybody keeps telling me they are.
Yeah.
But also, one of the reasons we use like corn oil in a lot of things is because we have a lot of corn. We subsidize growing corn. We have more corn than we know what to do with. Whereas sugar is hard to grow in the United States. You can only grow it in like some little parts of Florida, and we have tariffs against the importation of it. So corn oil, high fructose corn syrup is cheaper. That's why we use it. That's all there is.
I'm also totally for getting rid of the corn subsidies. Because we, like you said, we have more corn than we know what to do with. To the point where they're just like, what can we do with it? Let's throw it in cars. Let's have it run on corn instead of gas. Like, They're just looking for shit to do with it. If you stop paying them to grow surplus corn, you're going to run into less.
It's the same thing with soybeans. Soybeans are a heavily subsidized crop, but I don't think
sucks because they're soy.
I don't think the Trump administration has the political will or focus to piss off the farmers and try to tackle farm subsidies. That's not populist. He certainly isn't going to. Maybe he'll get rid of the sugar tariffs, but like it's not really getting rid of tariffs really isn't his thing, and you just can't grow sugar in most places in the U.S.
What if we could? What if we contact the Jews and get their weather machines, and we make it so that you can grow like the climate is perfect for growing sugar in America?
Their weather machine. We have the Weather Dominator, which they used to make Hurricane Helene hit Asheville, North Carolina for some reason.
Well, I mean,
now, fortunately, most of this audience actually knows what you're talking about. I've been around dudes who I made a comment about Cobra and the Weather Dominator, and I got a blank stare. Like, wow, you kids are so deprived.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, they didn't get any USS Flag play set either. So,
oh no, they didn't. But they didn't even know what they were missing.
Right, that's the worst tragedy of all.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know the crushing loss of realizing you're never going to have an aircraft carrier in your living room.
Not with that attitude. 3D printing's a thing now, Mike. You can do it.
Actually, I've seen guys will build like scaled up USS flags out of plywood in their garages.
Fine, I'll make it my own.
Considering that the set is probably like $8,000 now.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, but yeah, a lot of this, it's one of the things about like the food thing. Like, yeah, maybe seed oils in excess quantities are bad or whatever, but like the reason Americans are fat is because we lead sedentary lives and we eat a lot. I know I had to lose 70 pounds over the last couple of years. It's like there's no conspiracy. I just like to eat food. I drink energy drinks. I'm sorry, guys. There's no secret European healthy version of energy drinks. It's got 50 grams of sugar and 50 carbs. It's bad. I drink it. It's a vice. Okay.
Yeah.
I drink it because I like it. I'm not pretending that I'm being poisoned. Well, if I am being poisoned, I'm doing it to myself, and that's okay. I can do that.
I guarantee you, it's nothing compared to.
If you ever want to feel better about like U.S. Health and obesity levels, just go to fucking Scotland. They could be like, they call us obese.
I mean,
statistically, also, America is no longer the fattest country in the world. I believe that distinction now belongs to Mexico. So, America wins again.
Well, all their skinny people came here. So. The fat ones couldn't fit over the fence. They got stuck in the tunnels.
It just registered.
Yeah, I know. I'm counting on that delay because it's oh man.
Now, speaking of Mexico, although we don't have a whole lot of time left, there's some debate now about, are we going to go after the cartels, hammer and tongs?
If you didn't want a forever war, do I have news for you?
On the other hand, and I've said, speaking of the whole forever wars thing is, for one thing, it's bullshit, because once you start bitching about, oh, this is taking too long, then you have what happened in Afghanistan. Sami Sadat has laid out, as soon as Obama put an end date, we started to lose.
Yep.
The Americans may have the watches, but we have the time. Why do you think the contracts in World War II were duration of the war plus 6 months?
And if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about with Mexico, stand by.
But this idea that a war is
so yeah, he's talking about using the military to attack the cartels in Mexico, right? He released a video. This is from the Trump-Vance website. Now, you can argue that this is necessary, that it's overdue. And certainly the cartels are bad guys who do bad things, and it's bad for the country. It's a national security threat, no matter how you slice it, right?
It is.
But if you think Iraq and Afghanistan were counterinsurgency clusterfucks, wait till you see what happens when we're fighting one on our own border. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be pretty. And if we do it, we're going to have to see it through. And Americans are bad at seeing it through because we get tired of war real fast when it drags on.
We have this idea that a war is something that we can. Honestly, some of it goes back. The guys at First Manassas in the Civil War. We're gonna end it here. We're gonna be home by Christmas, and it dragged on for 4 more years, and saw the highest, probably the second highest loss of life of any war the U.S. has been involved in. We've got this idea that we can just hit them hard, hit them fast, be done with it, and go home. It's not the way war works all the time.
No, but it's a great recruiting method.
Yeah.
So.
But it's not reality.
No, it's not.
It very rarely has been.
Here's the thing, because which I don't know if Mike already said this, because you guys have been freezing up on my end, so I don't know if
you're the one who's been freezing up, sir.
Okay, all right, so it's both ways then, but what pisses me off a lot, and I know a lot of vets do this, so it's not just civilians. But what pisses me off a lot is when people complain about, no more endless wars and just another forever war and that shit. And it's like, you've never fought one. I don't remember seeing you in the last forever war. You were at the mall. The rest of us, in the military, were actually fighting this thing. And I know a lot of vets have fallen to that same talking point and that same slogan and that shit. So I'm not just putting it on civilians. But okay, if you think a forever war or an endless war or whatever is bad enough on the other side of the planet that you're not involved with, and you can go about your daily life without experiencing ever, imagine how bad that shit's going to be when it's on your doorstep. Because the cartels aren't in Mexico; the cartels are here.
Oh yeah,
and they've been fighting an outright military conflict with the Mexican government since 2005. Yeah. And tens of thousands of people have died in this war. Not just combatants, civilians, bystanders. It's brutal. It's worse than Iraq was for us. And Mexico can't withdraw because it's their own country. So you either win or you lose. There's no other.
Yeah, and you can't just nuke it from orbit and fucking. Why don't we just glass the place and go home? Because it's your home. It's here. Okay.
And let's face it, that was never an option in anything but the friggin' Russian missiles are flying anyway.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I've always hated whenever somebody was like, oh, we should just glass the fucking Middle East or some shit. It's like, it's never worked. That's never worked, and you're going to be just as upset, but now you're a fucking genocidal maniac.
Yeah. As for the cartels, I think it's inevitable. There's only so long you can let people like that push, and they're pushing, and we're starting to see the effects on this side of the border. We've been seeing the effects on this side of the border for decades now. It just hasn't been registering as much because it's getting so much worse.
Right. I'm not against fighting the cartels or using the U.S. military to fight the cartels. I'm not actually against this. I just want all the people who are just like, whatever Trump says, the best and all that shit, and whatever fucking popular slogan I've gotten from Benny Johnson, I'm just gonna fucking repeat and all that shit. It's like, just so you guys know, this is not gonna be a fun time. It might be necessary, and it's only gonna get worse the longer we wait. But this is going to be a forever war, and it's going to be on your doorstep. It's going to be ugly. You are going to be in danger, and it's not going to be fun.
American civilians will probably die in this war. They will target Americans at home because they are.
To some extent, they already have 150,000 overdoses from fentanyl. Is
right. But we're going to see the shit on Live Leak. Like, it's going to be that kind of death.
Again, in some places, it's already happened. There were beheadings in El Paso over a decade ago. But it's going to get worse. And like you said, the longer we leave it, the worse it's going to get.
And also, once you engage, you can't back down. The United States cannot be seen as losing a war to fucking criminals. That cannot be allowed to happen.
Yeah.
So...
And before anybody fucking chimes in with this shit, you can't avoid this war by just legalizing drugs. All right? Drugs are not the cartel's main method of operation and getting profit and all that shit. Violence is. The fact that they're willing to do illegal shit is what keeps them going. Okay?
It's what gives them power.
Pete, I believe you brought up a while ago that, like, the most money a certain cartel has ever made in their entire existence, and it's one of the bigger cartels, is by stealing oil from Pemex and selling it on the black market.
It was Los Zetas about a decade ago.
Yeah.
The other cartels have been diversifying ever since. Los Zetas changed the model. In many ways. But it's not just narcotics. It's human trafficking. It's extortion. It's kidnapping. It's natural resources. It is hostile takeovers of legitimate business. The cartels run the avocado business in California now.
Why don't we just legalize avocados?
We already did.
Oh, shit. Well, fuck. Now what am I going to do with all my libertarian talking?
Drugs have only ever been a means to an end. That end, of course, being money and power, and where that competition comes in, or pressure from governments, then that's when the violence comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And
so, there's not going to be like an easy. There's no easy fix to this. There's no one cool trick we can do to just take care of the cartel problem.
Yeah. And Trump is not going to be the great peacemaker, deal maker that gets you out of it. It's going to be, hey, guys, we're in for a fucking slugfest, and it's going to be going on long after I leave office. Like, it's going to be that. So,
yes, Rick, Jalisco New Generation is currently the most violent organized crime group on the face of the planet. 80% of the killings in Mexico last year were CJNG. Which is saying something, because currently El Mayo's people and the Chapitos are engaged in a violent civil war for who's going to run what's left of Sinaloa.
Which is, do you remember what kicked that off? Is which was the guy that got tricked into fucking going to the US and then just getting caught in a fucking police sting? Like, it was so stupid, I thought it would be in, like, Sicario.
El Chapito's been in and out of prison a couple of times.
No, it's not Chapito. It's the other guy.
El Mayo?
Yeah, El Mayo. I think he went on into the U.S. Like, flew in on a private plane and that shit, and then just immediately upon landing, like, the U.S. police and border patrol and all those guys just like fucking formed him. And he's like, I've been bamboozled. I'm starting a civil war because it was all your fault, Chapito.
Let's see.
There was one who faked his own death.
That's been El Chapo for like...
Yeah. This is Fernando Gutierrez Ochoa.
Apparently, the new president of Mexico is demanding explanations from the U.S. government about El Mayo's arrest.
Well, fuck her commie ass. Like, which one? We get to arrest whoever we want on our fucking soil.
Yeah, that's.
She's not helping. AMLO's protege is not helping the stories about AMLO being hand in glove with the cartels by doing that. But
some people might be thinking out there, well, that doesn't make sense. If she was really a communist, she'd want a revolution and would want to nationalize everything. I'm like, yeah, communist regimes also work with criminal organizations. Sometimes they can just be criminal organizations, like North Korea.
Because they are criminal organizations.
Yes.
Scratch a communist, find a gangster.
Yeah. Well, at least he's using hugs, not bullets.
Yeah, that didn't work out very well for AMLO, did it?
Well, he's got his protege in there. Fucking.
But yeah, the fact of the matter is this whole, we would just want peace. Yeah, the hippies were saying the same thing, and peace is not the natural state of man in this world.
Also, I saw a video clip.
The natural state of man in this world is Tennessee.
I saw a video clip of J.D. Vance saying that, like, it's not in America's interest to go to war with Iran. We don't want to do that. Like, look.
I kind of do.
I mean, guys, if you are unwilling to go to war, and that is your main priority, right, and you wish to avoid armed conflict, then countries and organizations who aren't squeamish about armed conflict will always have the advantage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, you're either going to have to fight them or surrender to them. And we've been trying to appease Iran since 2008 when President Obama was elected. How's that working out?
And this whole
when we fucking killed Soleimani, like, you know what Iran's response was? I know it very, very well. They launched a couple of rockets and we're just like, yay, we did what we wanted to do. We showed them, it was all like saber rattling for their own internal propaganda stuff to say like, oh, we totally fucking got them back. They'll never try this shit again. But really, they were just like, oh, they killed our guy and there's nothing we can do. So it was the same shit with the Russian ICBMs and all that shit.
But the fact of the matter is, we don't want to go to war with Iran. Like, we've been at war with Iran. We've been at war with Iran for 45 fucking years.
Thanks, Carter.
They've killed hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans. And we just let them get away with it because, there was a clip of an interview with some CIA dude that I saw a few months ago. He was talking about somebody just before OIF, talking about how we could be in Tehran in a matter of months, and his reaction was, "Are you insane?" It's like, where do you think this shit's coming from, asshole?
Oh yeah, we've had. I've been on the receiving end of a lot of Iranian munitions, because they were supplying the Taliban and other reasons. But yeah, the reason we killed Soleimani, well, one of the reasons was because he was the one that was importing and training, which got AQI and all the insurgents in Iraq how to create explosively formed projectiles to cut through the armor of your vehicle and kill more Americans. So that was all Quds Force shit. Like,
And guess who's also Iran's biggest ally?
Russia.
Russia.
Weird, huh? Crazy.
Who
I like how
incidentally
none of us said Allah. It's just like, no, fuck you. He doesn't like you either.
Incidentally, the Russians were also supporting the Taliban in the last few years.
Yep. I just call them sore losers because it didn't work out when they tried it.
Well, guys, we are at the 2-hour mark, so I don't know if you want to take some questions from the chat or if we just want to wrap it up. And I see a comment down there. Yeah, we were talking before about Iran and North Korea and Russia and China. Like, yeah, it's a little axis of evil there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only ones he left out were Russia and China. And he probably should have included them.
And Japan.
Well, he W once looked into Putin's eyes and saw his soul. So
It was made of vril. Yeah. I mean, to wrap it up, I'll reiterate. Remember when we were talking about, like, when was Trump his most effective at bringing peace during his first term? When North Korea was saying all sorts of shit, being like, oh, we're going to nuke America and all that shit. He's like, do it, you fucking bitch. Do it, pussy. You fucking nerd. Fuck you. Like, when he was just going to town on Twitter. We were watching a fucking peace negotiation on Twitter.
And he was bullying Kim Jong-un, which was hilarious.
Yeah. Like it's projecting that strength and being like, oh, you don't think I'll fucking do it? Like, that's where you get most of your strength and deterrence from, not from being like, we don't want to fight these guys. It's not in our interest. If they do anything, we'll just be very upset.
I believe President Trump tweeted "fire and fury" in all caps.
Yeah.
Just to let little Kim know he meant business. Yeah.
Oh, dude, motherfucker went grade ape Super Saiyan on that motherfucker.
I think we will wrap up with some wise words from the real President Reagan.
Oh, you mean that neocon?
Those who would trade our freedom for the soup kitchen of the welfare state have told us they have a utopian solution of peace without victory. They call their policy accommodation. And they say if we'll only avoid any direct confrontation with the enemy, he'll forget his evil ways and learn to love us. All who oppose them are indicted as warmongers. They say we offer simple answers to complex problems. Well, perhaps there is a simple answer. Not an easy answer, but simple. If you and I have the courage to tell our elected officials that we want our national policy based on what we know in our hearts is morally right. We cannot buy our security, our freedom from the threat of the bomb, by committing an immorality so great as saying to 1 billion human beings now enslaved behind the Iron Curtain, give up your dreams of freedom, because to save our own skins, we're willing to make a deal with your slave masters. Alexander Hamilton said, a nation which can prefer disgrace to danger is prepared for a master and deserves one. Now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second: surrender. Admittedly, there's a risk in any course we follow other than this, but every lesson of history tells us that the greater risk lies in appeasement. And this is the specter our well-meaning liberal friends refuse to face, that their policy of accommodation is appeasement. And it gives no choice between peace and war, only between fight or surrender. If we continue to accommodate, continue to back and retreat, eventually we have to face the final demand, the ultimatum. And what then? Well, Nikita Khrushchev has told his people he knows what our answer will be. He has told them that we're retreating under the pressure of the Cold War, and someday, when the time comes to deliver the final ultimatum, our surrender will be voluntary, because by that time, we will have been weakened from within spiritually, morally, and economically. He believes this because from our side, he's heard voices pleading for peace at any price, or better read than dead. Or as one commentator put it, he'd rather live on his knees than die on his feet. And therein lies the road to war, because those voices don't speak for the rest of us. You and I know and do not believe that life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy? Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the Pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard round the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead, who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis, didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which they must not advance.
Oh man, that was awesome. It's been a while since I've watched that clip without the Transformers music playing in the background.
Yeah. It does add a little bit, but I wanted one with just rating.
It's because all the cinematic soundtrack music videos, I guess you would call them, like they're a cut up part of that speech. It's not that section in its entirety, and it misses a lot.
The whole speech is like half an hour long,
but it's an amazing half an hour speech. I've listened to the full thing. I've read the transcript of the full thing, and almost all of it is still applicable to this day.
Oh yeah, because let's face it, human nature is human nature. What is applicable in one age is usually applicable in most ages. The idea that somehow it isn't is part of what has gotten us to the past we're in now.
Yeah,
where we're trying to pick between who's the slightly lesser scumbag.
Between who?
All the way around.
Yeah.
Because honestly, between the three of us, I think Pete is probably the least scumbag. I undoubtedly hold the distinction for scummiest. I win again.
I'm not going to speculate on that one. But
Were we not talking about that?
I missed entirely everything that you said because I was replying to the YouTube chat.
Anyway, we are now past 2 hours, so how's about we wrap this up? Ending it with a movie was a great idea. We should do that more often.
All right. So, don't fall for the propaganda. Keep your head on a swivel. Know that some things have to be fought for. And one single source is no source. So if you're seeing it coming from one weirdo on Twitter, it's probably bullshit.
Unless it's me.
Like the guy saying the Navy SEALs were going rogue and attacking cartels.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
I believe it. I just don't believe that they're like actively serving Navy SEAls. I'm sure it was just like a bunch of the fucking bro vets being like, this is really going to get our fucking apparel company going.
And with that, we will see you all next month, hopefully.
Take it easy unless you're a SEAL. I'm sorry.